is calling. He's calling for disciples. I know that's what we want to be. I know we all love Jesus for what He has done for us. I know we all want to live lives that are pleasing to Him. And so we want to understand just what does it mean to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. Last month we looked at that call. Part of discipleship means answering the call. And we saw where Jesus called those first few disciples, Peter and Andrew and James and John. And we saw where answering the call of Jesus to be a disciple means that we're going to have to leave something. Maybe it means leaving an old lifestyle. Maybe it means leaving some habits that we developed over the years that we know are not consistent with what God is wanting us to be and to do. It might even mean leaving some people. Maybe some people we once called friends because they were going down a path, but Jesus is going down a different path, and if we're going to follow Him, we're going to have to leave those people and follow Jesus. We're going to have to walk a narrow path that leads to life rather than a wide path that leads to destruction. And so this morning we take another look at discipleship. We take another step on that path as we follow with Jesus. And again this morning we're looking at Peter. And I'm so glad because Peter is just easier to relate to. At least he is for me. I mean, Paul was just this magnificent individual, such a heart for serving Jesus. And Peter as well has a heart for serving Jesus, but sometimes Peter stumbles, doesn't he? But still, Peter wants to be a disciple. And so we're going to look at Peter again. And from our scripture reading a moment ago, Jesus is with His disciples in the region of Caesarea Philippi. And He asks them this question: who do people say that the Son of Man is? Who is Jesus? And in one sense, this question sounds a little bit odd coming from Jesus. It might sound a little self-serving. You know, if you were to go up to somebody and ask them, what do people think of me? What are people saying about me? Might sound a little prideful, perhaps. Of course, that's not Jesus's. That's not His intent. That's not who He is. That's not why He's asking. He's trying to make a point here with these few select individuals that He's called to follow Him. He wants to make sure that they understand. And just earlier in the chapter, He has warned these disciples about the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And they misunderstood Him. They thought He was talking about bread. And so He reminds them of what He did when He fed the 5,000 from a few loaves of bread and a few fish. Because it's evident that even though they witnessed that most powerful sign, They didn't understand what that sign meant. And so he's bringing it back, and he wants to know, he wants them to start thinking, who do people say that I am? He wants them to understand. It's a powerful question. Remains powerful today. Jesus is wanting to know if people really understand who He is. Because that question and the answer to that question is the difference between being just a believer and being a disciple. It was this question that challenged the German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was really struck by this conversation that Jesus had with His disciples. Bonhoeffer lived during World War II, during the Nazi regime. Ultimately, he was executed because of a part that he had played in trying to assassinate Adolf Hitler. But as a theologian, he was disturbed, he was confused by what he was seeing as he looked at the atrocities of that regime and what they were, the crimes they were committing against the human race. And as he looked at the church, speaking generally of the Christian church, as he looked at Christians, so-called, and he wondered, how can they just sit there? As they're seeing these horrible things happen, how can they seemingly ignore such vile behavior? How can they tolerate this? Why do they not rise up? At one point, he came to New York City so that he could study at Union Theological Seminary. And during his time there, he worshiped with an African American congregation of the Abyssinian Baptist Church. And he was so moved, so stirred by the enthusiasm of the worship. But he noticed something else. He noticed that the pews were padded. That brings it a little close to home, doesn't it? And those padded pews became a metaphor for the angst that he was feeling. Because it showed how Christians had become so comfortable in their worship huddles, while in the world around them there was so much wickedness. And for Bonhoeffer, it was just this huge inconsistency that Christians could be so comfortable, so tolerant, so calm in the face of such evil. He saw where the Christian faith had become something academic. He saw where people who called themselves Christians would come together and they would study the life of Jesus. They would learn things about Jesus. They would notice His relationships with other people. They They studied the principles of life that Jesus tried to teach. But there was nothing personal about their relationship with Jesus. He saw where there was no investment on the part of individual believers. Their faith cost them nothing. And he came to the conclusion that that's not it. That's not it. And this question that Jesus puts before us this morning forces the issue. Who do people say that I am? And then especially the subsequent question, who do you say that I am? And his disciples said, well, some say that you're John the Baptist. Some say that you're Elijah. Others say that you're Jeremiah or one of the prophets. And all of those are great men, no doubt, notable men, people to be admired, people to look up to, people to learn about, certainly. Placing Jesus in their company, that's a compliment to Jesus. But recognizing those men, admiring them, that doesn't cost anybody anything. And so Jesus asks the more pointed question, but who do you say that I am? And I have to wonder if when Jesus poses that question, if he's a little bit nervous, wondering, how are they going to answer? Because Jesus knows, he understands everything. Everything is at stake in how they answer this question. And I wonder if he breathes a little bit of a sigh of relief as Peter gives his reply. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Because Peter had made a very costly confession. Because he nailed it, didn't he? You are the Christ. You are the Messiah. You are the Anointed One. You are Him. Peter, in confessing that, was not simply identifying Jesus. Peter was making several statements when he said, "You are the Christ." Peter was saying that his life, Peter's life, was never going to be the same. Peter was saying that he understood it was never going to be enough just to know something about Jesus. He was going to have to follow Him. Peter recognized that Jesus was not here just to start another religion. No, Jesus was here to conquer the heart of man. And Peter recognized that following Jesus, being a disciple of Jesus, was going to cost him more than he ever thought possible. And he was fine with that. Because for Peter, Jesus was the Christ. And Peter was going to follow him. It means the same thing today for you and for me. Who do you say that I am? You know, will we equate him with other notable people? Will we place him in company with men like Albert Einstein, perhaps, Plato, Aristotle, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King? Or will we place him in a category all his own? A man like no other, and more than a man. But he is the Christ, the Son of the living God. Because you probably remember that day when you stood before others and you said, "Yes, I believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God." And when we made that confession, we were not just saying, "Okay, I believe that, and I'm going to learn what I can about this man." Now, when we made that costly confession, what we were saying was, all right, I'm going to turn away from that life, and I'm going to turn to the life that Jesus wants me to live. It's going to be a different kind of life. The world wants us to follow it, doesn't it? The world is doing everything it can to entice us to go that way. You know, I think back to that age where Bonhoeffer lived, such a horrible, horrible time. And all those people who were told, "It's just a shower." Gas chambers. And that's exactly what the world is doing. That's exactly what Satan is doing. He's promising us all these blessings, all these pleasures, all these wonderful things. It's death. It's destruction. Jesus says, "Follow me. I want you to be my disciple." Who do you say that I am? Will we confess him? Will we make that costly confession? And may God give each one of us the strength to live the life that Jesus calls us to live. What a glorious future awaits us as his children. If we can be an encouragement to anyone here this morning to join us on this journey as disciples of Jesus, we want to encourage you in any way that we can. But please come and let your request be known right now as we stand and as we sing.
Behind me, the cross before me, the world behind me, the cross before me.